outreach and education and tracking efforts used by regional municipalities to reduce discharges of bacteria and other pollutants in stormwater and to prevent non-stormwater discharges to protect receiving water quality and to support beneficial uses. We are very much looking forward to this discussion. This is a very important topic, a topic that you could kind of pretend is in the back burner when it doesn't rain for years on end. However, this year we have really been putting it to the test. So we know exactly what happens when it rains a lot and where that water goes, and we can follow the fate and transport of that bacteria. So please give us an update.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Cantu and members of the board. My name is Amanda Carr. I'm Deputy Director for OC Environmental Resources, and we are the lead permittee for the Orange County Stormwater Program. So I'm here opening our remarks on behalf of my I guess I'll speak for the whole county, but primarily focused on South County today, as well as my regional colleagues who are joining us today. Riverside County, City of San Diego, and County of San Diego will also be speaking on their programs. And we really see this as a continuation of the discussion that we began at the TSO hearing for the Beaches and Creeks TMDL. I know particularly we had questions on our public education regarding bacteria efforts. If you will indulge me, I'm going to expand on that topic a little bit. And actually, Jenna, I'll be handing off our presentation to Jenna Voss of my staff, and we're going to do a little bit of table setting for everyone else. We'll highlight our program, but then also really kind of set the stage for where public education has come over the multiple permit terms, really moving from sort of bean counting of impressions to now really social science-based, very technical and data-driven campaigns, community-based social marketing campaigns that we have evolved into. So with that, let me introduce Jenna Voss, who is our watershed manager for the South Orange County Watershed Management Area Program. Jenna is my public education and IRWM guru, so is very well known amongst all our partners in South Orange County, both with our wastewater agencies, our regulatory agencies, and our own cities. So I will turn things over to Jenna. I believe she has also given some of our materials to the clerk just so you can see some of our swag that goes along with our public education activities. And so I'll turn things over to Jenna.
Thank you, Amanda, for that introduction, and thank you for hosting us today. We're very excited to get the opportunity, all of us, to give you an overview of our programs. We're very proud of the work that we do. So as Amanda said, my name is Jenna Voss. I'm representing South Orange County. I'll be introducing you to our public education program we call H2OC. Next. So I'll first cover who we are and what we are. But then, as Amanda said, really get into some of the nuts and bolts of the evolution of our program over the last 2 decades of implementation. Focus on that data-driven aspect, of which we are very proud. We're all scientists, and we're applying the best of social science in education as well as we do in all the areas of our program. And then highlight for you 2 examples, case studies of how we've applied that data-driven process, and highlight, as Amanda alluded to, some of that collaborative aspect that we really find very important to the success of our program. So that's why first and foremost I have collaboration. So who we are and what we do. We are first and foremost collaborative. We, as Amanda said, H2OC represents all 34 of our Orange County cities, the county, and the flood control district, but it also represents through engagement and ongoing collaboration our partnerships with other agencies, nonprofits, and partners throughout the county. And as we will highlight for you throughout this presentation, we center our cohesive brand that we've built over 2 decades, centering behavioral outcomes in addition to regular measures of engagement and information that goes out in one direction. Next slide. So as Amanda said, H2OC represents all 34 co-permittees across the County of Orange. Obviously, we're in 2 different regional board areas. So I'm highlighting quickly for you the 11 South Orange County cities that participate in H2OC. We have a couple of our folks here today. And that is the geographic area represented by the program that I'll be talking about today within the San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board area. Next slide. So there's a lot of detail on this slide, but what I would like for everyone to take away from this is the evolution, the arrow moving forward. As Amanda said, in the early stages of our program over the last 2 decades, looking really at the 3rd term permit, which was a quintessential change related to education and outreach requirements and permits, that really was the foundational period of our program, focused almost exclusively on information and public awareness. The primary measures were impressions, bean counting, really saying how many times did we get a message out, but not necessarily knowing there wasn't information coming back. We did start in 2003, a quintessential part of our data gathering exercise, which is public awareness surveys. We conduct comprehensive public awareness surveys approximately every 2 to 3 years. We've done 7 over the 20 years that you see shown here. And that 2003 survey started that process of establishing a foundation by which we could measure knowledge gains and self-reported behavior change over time. Those were the primary metrics for our program. The next phase that you see there, between in that 4th term permit phase, really saw a quantum leap in the way that we approached our program. Though impressions and awareness, some of that bean counting is still a part of our requirements and something that we still do very much to establish that foundation and reiterate our foundational programming. We did establish in 2013 our first strategic planning exercise to respond to what our surveys were telling us, which is, yes, we were seeing incremental increases in knowledge and incremental changes in behavior, but that was self-reported behavior. Again, that's kind of one directional. We really wanted a methodology by which we could assess that behavior change and show progress over time in the way that in establishing our water quality priorities and linking the 2. So we chose community-based social marketing, or CBSM. You'll see that acronym many times today in my presentation and my colleagues' presentations. And that really for us was a key turning point in centering behavior change aspects of our program. And that gets us to kind of where we are today. And that is centering that strategic planning exercise of establishing measurable outcomes by which we measure our program and all elements therein. We have the foundational elements that are still very important to establishing who we are, what we do, and what is important about protecting water quality. But really shifting gears to centering CBSM and having long-term, ongoing, and data-driven behavior campaign and program elements. Next slide. And you'll see here that shifting graphics. I thought it would be helpful to show what that really looks like in real time. That first graphic that you see there, we call that the sad fish, very lovingly. But that shows you how much things have changed. That was just the knowledge and awareness phase, really trying to get information out, building a library of materials. Our program is called Project Pollution Prevention, and it really centered that piece of it. And as you'll see there, the sad fish is floating in trash, which is not establishing a very good social norm. So we've learned through our dive into the social science of how better to convey those messages. You'll see that transition in the second one, which has a much clearer message and really is the first go at CBSM, which was our Overwatering is Out campaign. So what we learned there is that after surveying the public, over the course of those surveys, everyone is showing a prioritization of water quality. It's very important to Orange County residents. They're aware of some of the key issues. But when we started talking about overwatering is out, that message got a little muddied. They weren't sure if it was H2OC doing that talking or if it was coming from other sources. We liked that people were willing to adopt behaviors, but again, that was self-reported. So we made some adjustments. And I have for you a PSA, it's a little 30-second PSA, hopefully it plays, where you're going to see those things start to combine. establishing that foundational campaign of this is who we are as H2OC, and we are you. OC loves water. We're all in this together. And in that critical re-envisioning of our program, you'll see how that manifested in our behavior change campaign. If you, oh, this sound isn't going, that's okay. It has lovely music, but that's okay. Especially when it gets to the heart. So it's very much the messaging about join us, we're all in this together, OC loves water, and that has become kind of, that is, you'll see that theme throughout all of our website and all of our materials, and we're really centering that focus in community. Go ahead, next slide. Next one. Now it wants to play. Okay, there we go. So this is effectively the flow of a CBSM campaign. This is a lot, and I wanted to show that intentionally. Community-based social marketing has data infused at every step. Every piece of a CBSM campaign has data collection associated with it. Understanding your audience is so pivotal. You select a behavior, you consider a lot of information about whether or not that you can make movement on that behavior, but you're also really focused on identifying and understanding your audience. What are the barriers to accepting new behaviors that we would find beneficial for protecting water quality? And what are the benefits that can help us outweigh those barriers? And really looking to leverage those two. Developing strategies to very specifically address that audience. As Amanda said, this transition means different focus. The first phases of our program were very broad, reaching out to everyone. This is very specific. In order to say whether or not you've made movement in behavior, you have to really understand your audience and establish a mechanism to measure that change. And that's what this does. There's measurement at each piece of the puzzle. And I will reiterate this in the examples that I have here. Next slide. So again, prioritizing behaviors needs to look at a few different things. What is the overall impact? Does that behavior have an impact on water quality? Is it significant? We don't want to focus our efforts on something that won't move the needle. Is it probable that someone will adopt this behavior? And that's, again, looking at those benefits and barriers. How many are already doing this? Is it something everyone's already doing, which means that, again, we won't really move the needle? And then, again, for whom is this relevant? Understanding your audience. Next slide. And this, for me, I think is kind of the crux of CBSM, which is understanding those benefits and barriers. What you'll see there is that when benefits are too low to be overcome, they can be overcome by barriers. And this is something that people experience every day. Just because someone knows something is important, like those surveys told us, they're aware and they care, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll adopt a specific behavior because the barriers and benefits are specific to that audience. And this is where you can really get into the weeds. But by going through the CBSM process, you can pull that information out and understand what those barriers and benefits are so that you can minimize barriers and emphasize benefits, and then you start to see movement. Next slide.
Could I ask you to just illustrate that point with an example?
That's where we're headed.
Oh, okay.
I've got two for you.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm on it. All right. So I'll highlight for you two examples of the way we've walked through this and really focus on those benefits and barriers. And I've centered that in these presentations. Next slide. So the first is trash. We know that trash is very visible. It's a tangible pollutant that a lot of the public can wrap their heads around. We wanted to focus on that as one of our CBSM campaigns. And it fits with our water quality priorities. It is also linked, it's linked to other water quality priorities that we've been talking about, as Amanda said, with the TSO. So we wanted to touch on this. Next slide. So this slide shows that data-driven process at every single step. Looking at the priority pollutant, making sure that this is something that you can actually create movement in. Is this something that is pervasive? Are there ways that we can address this through specific behaviors? Yes. Conducting assessments of trash accumulation rates and understanding the problem and quantifying the problem. What you see there is some of our observational data and an area that we've isolated for research. And then understanding the site-specific attributes. Once we started diving in, realizing that there were some commonalities, areas where students between schools and fast food restaurants or schools and skate parks, for a very specific example, in those transfer zones, and once they landed, that's where we were starting to see the trash accumulation. So when we get to that, summarizing this disposal type, we're starting to really understand our audience, and we realized there were different patterns in that audience. So we took 2 different tacks, and we have 2 different campaigns associated with addressing trash. Next slide. This is where we get into the benefits and barriers. As I mentioned, we had an overarching behavioral observation that kind of set the stage. So we focused on Etne Skate Park and Lake Forest. We identified the litter accumulation rates, foot traffic, got a really good lay of the land, understanding how trash is getting there and what are the behavioral mechanisms taking place. For example, we saw that 17% of the skaters that we observed in total were actively littering or leaving trash behind, and all of them were in groups with their friends. So you're starting to see some patterns emerge. That is really important for us to understanding the behaviors. Then also asking some good questions. So what were their perceived barriers to disposing of trash properly? There were a few different responses, but by and large, the theme was, well, I forgot. I was a group of friends, I forgot, or there was no trash can around, or I don't know, some people are just lazy. So the kids' perception was that, oh, okay, well, there's just this kind of group mentality. But there were some really important benefits that we could amplify. In particular, the kids had a really heightened environmental awareness. They cared. And this gets back to that point where they care already, they just need the tools. So in addition to their sense of environmental awareness, they also had a significant sense of ownership in the park. The skate park was theirs. It was very important to them. They wanted it to be clean. They wanted it to be safe. And that also gets to trash was viewed as a safety hazard. So you're starting to see there are some things we can latch on to here. We also understood our audience, mostly male, young skaters, understanding that the target behavior is just check your surroundings before, with the group, and throw away trash before you leave. We wanted to emphasize that a safe park protects you and while you're skating, and is also getting to that sense of ownership. And the key messages of emphasizing that ownership and that cleanliness equals safety. Next slide. We saw some really great results. In our pilot event, we had 34 youth skaters come up to and engage with us. And we're very proud of this, an 85% commitment rate. So one of the key elements of CBSM is asking for commitment and establishing those social norms. And I have for you some of the swag Amanda mentioned, which are the commitment stickers that kids put on our board for us, and the stickers that you'll see there, 47% placed their stickers directly on their helmet or their board, which is a big deal for skaters because that's their board. Yeah. So we were very proud of that. And you can take some of those home. But quintessential to this is that pre and post showed us that we had a 57% decrease in trash accumulation. So it worked.
What was the time frame from when you first surveyed how much litter you had, and then you finally could recognize the 57% reduction? What was the time frame during which time you did the booth and you did the outreach, and how long did it take for that impact to happen?
Well, I will say COVID was in the middle of some of this, which we had some fits and starts, but I believe it was 2 to 3 months in between, because I think we redid some of the pre and post, or the pre. And the really important to this is co-creation. We had some initial outreach with the group so that the materials themselves were built based on the feedback we got from the kids. So there was some interaction during, once we could come out of COVID, but I want to say it was about 2 to 3 months.
Cute shark. I mean, I'd put this on my helmet. And what about extension? kids grow up and new kids come, and what's the process to keep that particular issue going in that location?
That's a really good question. So part of this is that you have to keep engaging. You'll see there the poster up on the wall. So there's materials around the facility and making sure that the kids are also your messengers. So passing that along. By making the commitments, we're asking them to be those messengers. So the hope is that there's some social diffusion. But we also know and recognize that through rollout, this is something that you may need to iterate. Yeah.
So that was, in a sense, my question. I wanted to ask, does this behavior, the good behavior, habituate over time? In other words, do they go back to their old habits, or is it a permanent change? And then how would you actually measure that? Do you measure that just with long-term studies, or?
Well, we can't track individuals, right. But I will say that social science has proven time and again that making a commitment, writing your name, putting it on a board, and making a public statement that you are committing to something makes you far more likely to follow through. So that's why you'll see a theme throughout the day of making commitments. That is one of the ways that we do that through campaigns. And then tracking over time trash accumulation rates and knowing when you need to start iterating again to make sure that that stays centered.
And so what is that time period when you have to start reiterating again?
It's dependent on the campaign and the focus of that specific.
Well, you gave us an example of skate park. What about the skate park?
Well, because we just finished this fairly recently, we haven't reiterated it yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd be interested in that because that kind of helps people determine how often they have to run the programs. And
but it is also generally, it'll be driven by the water quality response that we see. So if we don't see trash accumulating, we can, well, we're assuming that the program is sort of self-iterating and that it is being diffused. But if we do see trash levels begin to inch up again, then we know we need to go back out again and iterate that message. So we try to use both types of data, the information that we're getting back from people themselves, as well as the impact that we're seeing in the environment.
Well, that's you're using the object of to determine it, which is a good way to do it, more passive. Thank you.
So in Lake Forest, for example, there's probably city maintenance people who go and empty trash containers and clean bathrooms or whatever. Have you engaged with them for them to give you feedback about an early warning of how trash is accumulating?
We did engage them throughout the process. That was really important for our establishing pre and post to make sure that they weren't going through and picking up the trash that we were trying to quantify. And they were fantastic and really on board. So that is one of the feedback mechanisms. And we do have other cities interested in doing this throughout the county. So that'll also help in understanding as we roll this out across a broader audience, what that data tells us when it starts coming back in.
Good.
Next slide. Go ahead, next slide. So the other example I wanted to highlight, and I want to make sure my co-presenters have a chance to highlight theirs as well. So I'll go through this a little quickly, but another acronym for you, OEO, is Overwatering is Out. This is that campaign that taught us a lot of life lessons. Through our strategic programming and data review, we knew that we needed to tailor the program and make some adjustments to better link the behavioral outcomes we sought with, if we could, environmental outcomes. So we did a paired neighborhood study, isolated two very similar two neighborhoods with similar characteristics in Molten Niguel service area. So shout out to our Molten Niguel partners. And we were able to pair water usage data with in situ flow monitoring data and be able to quantify not just the adoption of behaviors and the commitments made, but then also to see if there's a resultant environmental outcome. Next slide. So as I've emphasized before, the benefits and barriers are really important. So we did a pre-survey with respondents or the residents of those neighborhoods, and we had a treatment and control. So once we got into the process of providing the materials, that's just going to the treatment. But we did want to understand our audience, and they reported that our observations, we saw a lot of runoff. We saw wet pavement. We saw weep holes with a lot of water coming out, so irrigating in the back. So we know that this is happening, but a lot of residents said, well, I thought I need to water long enough so that my plants stay alive. The ground needs to be soaked. And so we wanted to first center education, understanding that there are techniques to measure the soil moisture needs of your plants, and that it doesn't mean soaking to the point of runoff. And then also establish ourselves as having partners with credible sources. The public, they know within their service area, Molten Miguel, they know Municipal Water District of Orange County, they know Master Gardeners and UC Cooperative Extension. So making sure that we're all doing this together. And then I also wanted to note, respondents often or didn't ever observe water running off their property, so they didn't know it was happening. And that's because the message has gotten through, they're irrigating at 5 a.m., as they should for their plants. However, that means they don't know it's happening. So one of the other educational strategies here was to reiterate that is appropriate. However, again, here's a way of really getting to how much moisture needs to be in your soil and a way to measure how much you're actually applying. Next slide. And here are some of the benefits. The residents said that saving water and money was important, but also really emphasized preventing waste. So our strategy was to approach this from what we call stop loss, which means really getting to the fact that if you have water running off your property, it's not on a savings thing, you're wasting water. That's a resource that is precious and needs to be saved. And then really using positive language, really avoiding the cut this, don't do this, and focusing more on here's a tune-up kit. We can all do this. And then also consistently, all the residents rated protecting the health of local waterways very high. Again, they're aware and they care, but they really need the tools. So really focusing on that and establishing social norms with their own input, saying, all of you said this was important. Next slide. And you'll see that in all of our materials. So this is all the information that went out to the treatment neighborhood. So looking at establishing social norms in that initial letter, and there's that commitment card again. Next slide. And here's the tune-up kit with the soil moisture sensor. So here's the actual tool that you need to better get at how much your lawn really needs. Next slide. Here are some of our observations. We saw decreased instances of water flowing from weep holes, fewer broken misaligned sprinklers, and though our sample size was small between the treatment and control to really get at a difference in the wet pavement, we did see some movement in the observable behaviors. Central to this, though, we did have some mailed back commitments. Someone took the time, we had people take the time to fill it out and mail it back. We also had some increased engagement with our website, but really important here is that comparing between pre and post, using that continuous flow monitoring, we did see a greater reduction in the median and median daily maximum flow comparing the treatment and control neighborhoods. Next slide. So those are two of the examples that applied all of the benefit behavior research that I was referencing before. And next slide. Oh, sorry.
How long did it take you to run that, your control and your...
So we tried to focus on this needed to be in the dry season. So we did our pre-research just before the dry season began, conducted the research over the summer dry periods, and then did our conclusion in the early fall, just before the conclusion of the dry season.
So you ran it from June, July, August?
Yeah, through
September,
through September.
Through September.
And so this is just taking the opportunity to highlight some of our collaborative aspects of our program, and especially related to bacteria. We collaborate with our Human Waste Abatement Group, or again, another acronym, the WHAG. You'll see there are RV materials that mirror the rest of ours, again, establishing that umbrella H2OC message and brand, but really emphasizing the need to collaborate with our partners that do this work also, so that our messaging is on point and really relying on all of us collaboratively as trusted resources for the public and our target audiences. Next slide. And then I also wanted to highlight Urban Runoff Reduction Partnership. We have some of those partners in the room. We also wanted to thank them for our collaborative aspects, the collaborative things that we've been able to accomplish, like the Smart Watershed Network, some of the front-facing and public engagement tools around data, and some of also the public education, marketing, and other in-person events that have been really great to work with our partners on, such as H2O for HOAs and some of our materials. Next slide. And I wanted to highlight a jurisdictional example. I believe our friend from Dana Point is here today with us. They have the Bow Wow vow, which I think is fun to say. And that shows, again, commitments, establishing social norms, and also that commitment is tied with provision of a dispenser or refills for actually picking up pet waste. So again, tied to the behavior you want to see. Next slide. And these are just, I won't go through these are just some of our other programs. I didn't get to show you some of the bells and whistles of our program today, but I did want to highlight we have a couple other CBSM-based campaigns. One is on pesticide that we call the good, the bad, and the bugly. And then we have some public engagement programs like Adopt a Channel and online resources that we're very proud of that are tied in with our Esri database. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Fox?
I'd just like to say, I think that what you've done is really remarkable, and I'm very pleased, and I can see other areas adopting it too. But it looks to me that you took a much finer measure of what was going on in the community than sort of a broad look. Is that really correct? I mean, your outreach was...
Yes, we found that, we found, really, that highlights sort of the evolution of our understanding of, I mean, there's public education, there's increasing people's knowledge, which we were able to do and we were able to measure. But, we came from the standpoint of, well, if people only understood, then they would change their behavior. We began to realize that isn't the case. People can understand, but if there are those barriers to making those changes, then that's the, I know that I should do this, but, I'm in a hurry. I've got to take, I've got other things going on in my life. You don't take that next step. And so then in order to get to getting people to take those steps, we did have to do a finer look, and it does have to be more targeted because you need all of that other information, all of those other CBSM steps to get to that behavior change.
Now, one question I had is, one of the things that I've seen change over time where I live is you had one part of a lawn and then you had a narrow median. A lot of those narrow medians people replace. Was that an outcome, or it just had to do with applying the water appropriately? Well, I know we've now all ornamental turf is banned, or it's coming.
Well, this gets at kind of the multi-pronged approach. So as Amanda said, that we put a really fine point on with using CBSM on a specific audience so that we can measure the change. Again, that has to be really isolated. With the scientific processors, if you go out too big, there's too many confounding variables to actually be able to say whether or not the change happened. So that's why that is drilled down. But we have partnerships with our water agencies and shared educational and outreach efforts to really emphasize some of the turf removal and other rebate-based programs that are out there. And this is all kind of happening in tandem. And so that's where you're seeing some of those, the behavior adoption. We did emphasize some of that in our materials, but we were really trying to get at the water usage. And our partners are also providing the tools on how to make the structural changes to their yards. So all of those things are happening at the same time. They're just they're related but different, all under the same umbrella.
And this was based on potable water, or was it based on recycled water? The water being used, water being applied, maybe I should say.
In those neighborhoods, I believe it was potable water.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the dais? And from our Zoom participants, any questions? I don't hear any. Quick question though. I know we've got to get the opportunity to listen to lots of people. This design is a very complex and sophisticated design. Who helped you do it? It seems like it would be impossible to do this in-house. So I think I saw McKinsey somewhere in the fine print.
Doug McKenzie Moore, yes, but we work directly with Action Research, so that's Jennifer Cabanico, who partners with Dr. Moore. So we have our resident PhD who specializes in this that helps inform all of this, and we also, in pairing all of the data sources, relied pretty heavily on our expertise in using Esri and our partners at Molten Miguel.
And do you have a dollar amount that this campaign?
I was just about to get to that. Yeah, so obviously this is not, come up with some bumper stickers and some bus backs and you're done, or place some ads in the newspaper. So collectively, the Orange County Stormwater Program spends about $500,000 a year on public education campaigns.
Thank you very much. I mean, you're really doing it on the retail level, and I think that's what's necessary to get to individuals.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? Is that based on, so that's the budget for the whole county?
Well, actually, let me be clear.
Okay.
That is the money that the cities and Orange County pay to develop the program, the common program, and these campaigns that are then implemented. Cities then will spend additional resources applying those in their areas. So I think it's probably better to say we spend $500,000 a year developing the campaigns and having the foundational underpinnings. Then there is additional municipal resources that go into actually employing the campaigns in their jurisdictions.
Do you get any grants for these, or are they totally funded by the cities themselves?
In general, they're totally funded by the cities themselves. These aren't necessarily grant opportunities come around so infrequently that it's not really something that we can rely on grants for.
One of the tests for success is when you look at the avoided costs, that you're not having to do like a site treatment cost of dealing with that downstream. I mean, so it would be important eventually to look at the costs in terms of the entire picture, what you're not having to do because you're avoiding the pollution in the first place. That's good. To move on, I'd like to invite our staff member